Hi everyone, this is Andrew Prima, Ukrainian American, reporting from Kiev. In today's podcast, week 97 of Russian invasion of Ukraine, and this is the first week of January 2024. We're going to talk about Russian performed the second largest attack on Ukraine, launching almost 100 drones and missiles. And we're also going to talk about NATO's reaction to Russian missiles falling in NATO's member countries' territories. Does NATO blame became totally ineffective? So on January 2nd, while people celebrated the holidays with their families, Russia attacked Ukraine's two biggest cities on Tuesday in a new wave of heavy airstrikes that killed at least 5 people. According to the Interior Ministry of Ukraine, 135 people had been injured in the latest missile and drone attacks, including 61 in the Kharkiv, Ukraine city in the northeast, and 17 in around the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. Air Defense Forces of Ukraine shot down 10 of the Russian Kinjal missiles, which can fly at 10 times the speed of sound, out of about 100 of various types that were launched, said the General Valery Zaluzhny. But other missiles got through in Kiev and in Kharkiv, the provincial capital of the northeastern region. In Kiev and its surrounding regions, 4 people were killed and about 70 people were wounded, while in the Kharkiv region, 1 person was killed and about 60 got injured. The Kh-47M2 Kinjal missile is an air-launched ballistic rocket that is rarely used by Russian forces due to its cost and limited stocks. The barrage fired Tuesday, January 2nd, was the highest number used in one attack since the start of the war in Ukraine in 2022. As we covered in the previous podcast last week, the latest round of attacks by Russia began on Friday, December 29th, with its largest single assault on Ukraine, as fighting along the 1,000 kilometer or 620-mile front line has subsided into grinding attrition aimed winter. At least 41 civilians were killed since the weekend. At a 9-story Kiev apartment building where 2 people were killed, about 100 survivors gathered in the local temporary bomb shelter during the several hours of attack. Residents of this building said that explosions threw them against the wall while they were sitting in the chairs, and a subsequent fire trapped them on the top of the floor, and they had no choice but to get on the roof. But emergency crews rescued them a few hours later. They say that they're hitting military targets, but they're hitting people, killing our children and our loved ones, Ukrainians said after being rescued. Russia fired almost 100 missiles on January 2nd of various types of the weapons, said the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. He claimed that at least 70 rockets were shot down, almost all of them in the capital area, noting that Western supplied air defense systems, such Patriots and NASAMS, had saved hundreds of lives. Russia's defense ministry said it had launched missiles and drone strikes on military industrial facilities around Kiev, depots storing missiles and munitions supplied by the West also were targeted. However, this information could not be verified. In his nightly address, Volodymyr Zelensky said that since December 29th, Russia had used almost 300 missiles and more than 200 Shahed drones against Ukraine. The attacks created a desolate morning scene in Kiev, with most cafes and restaurants remaining closed. Many people opted to stay indoors or seek refuge in shelters as powerful blasts shook the city from the early morning. Air raid sirens blared for nearly 4 hours, and the city's subway station, which served as a shelter, was overcrowded. After the Air Forces issued warnings about incoming missiles, people wearing pajamas underneath their coats took sleeping bags, mats, and their pets to subway stations while a loud explosion echoed above. At one of the central subway stations in Kiev, hundreds of people filled the spacious underground area while trains continued to run. On Saturday, December 30th, right after the first massive Russian attack on Kiev, Ukraine armed forces performed a shelling of the Russian border city of Belgorod, killing more than 2 dozen people. Russia blamed Ukraine for the attack and has struck back repeatedly since then. So the second massive strike on January 2nd was a revenge after Ukraine revenged on the attack on December 29th. The Belgorod attack was one of the deadliest on Russian soil since Moscow's full scale invasion of Ukraine started more than 22 months ago. Russian officials said the death toll reached 26, including 5 children, after a new salvo of rockets Tuesday. Air defense systems near Belgorod shut down 4 missiles fired Tuesday by Ukrainian Vikha multiple rocket launcher, the Russian Defense Ministry reported. Over the previous 24 hours, Ukraine has carried out at least 50 attacks, including shelling and explosive from drones, said the regional Russian government Vyacheslav Gladkov. One person was killed and 11 others was injured by the shelling. Repeated attacks of Ukraine on Belgorod of the Russian region also prompted city authorities to temporarily shut down its cinemas and malls. Shortly after Mayor of Belgorod announcement, Russian media reported loud explosive heard in Belgorod yet again, and the Mayor Gladkov and Russia's defense ministry said 9 missiles launched by Ukraine were shot down over the region. They reported no casualties. Cities in western Russia have regularly come under drone attacks since May, although Ukrainian officials never acknowledged responsibility for the strikes on Russian territory or annexed Crimean Peninsula. Russian President Putin accused Western nations of using Ukraine to try to put Russia in its place, while vowing retribution. He insisted Moscow would only target military infrastructure in Ukraine, but officials in Kiev report civilians' casualties from daily attacks on apartment buildings, shopping centers, and residential areas. In other developments, Russia's defense ministry said one of its warplanes accidentally released munitions over the southwestern Russian village of Petropavlovka in the Voronezh region on Tuesday, damaging 6 houses and damaging the whole street, causing no injuries. It said an investigation will determine the cause of the accident, but it didn't say what type of weapon the warplane dropped. On Tuesday night, President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Russia had launched 500 missiles and drones against Ukraine in just 5 days. At least 32 people have died in Ukraine's capital in that time, 30 of them in one attack on 29th December when Russia launched one of the largest ever aerial attacks of this war. And it's not just the capital. Nearly 60 people have been killed nationwide, with Kharkiv in the northeast, Zaporizhia in the south, Odessa in the southern coast, and even the western part of Ukraine's capital, Lviv. Since launching its invasion, Russia has never stopped attacking Ukraine by the air, but this latest series of strikes marks a deadly escalation. What does this new phase in the war mean for Ukraine? And what's the plan behind Russia's renewed aerial assaults? Most likely changing tactics. Ukraine has not seen attacks as heavy as this since the start of Russian full scale invasion. And what's different? It's not just the size of the strike, it's the tactics. The attack on January 2nd lasted for 6 hours in the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv. The Russians launched a wave of drones at the capital. Ukraine's Air Force said it was able to shut down all 35 of them. But this was followed up with Russian missile attacks using different kinds of weapons in a bid to overwhelm and break through the city's defenses. Missiles have struck the very heart of Kiev in these last 5 days for the first time in months. They're always trying to find a better way to break through our air defense systems and make their attack more efficient, said Alexander Misenko at Ukraine's Center for Military Legal Research. That means using different kinds of missiles, hypersonic, cruise, and ballistic, but also firing these missiles along different routes. These weapons can change direction in the air over Ukraine, causing further headaches for air defense. Russia is also there in its focus. On December 29th, it aimed at weapons at cities across the country. On January 2nd, just at Kiev and Kharkiv. The Russians tried to concentrate their attacking power and just aim at one or two cities. The way Russia prepares for these strikes is changing as well. Ukraine's intelligence service SBU reported on Tuesday it had found and deactivated two robotic online surveillance cameras that it says were hacked by Russia to spy on Kiev's defenses and scout out targets. It's not clear how long Russia can keep carrying out these large scale strikes. Analysis carried out by Ukraine media suggests that attack on December 29th cost approximately $1.3 billion, along while the attack on January 2nd cost an extra $620 million. Ukraine had feared ahead of the winter that Russia was stockpiling weapons for large scale attacks, and this is what happened. They're still trying to achieve the goal to shut down the energy infrastructure of Ukraine and freeze people to death. Ukraine officials said that Russia still has its stockpile around 1,000 ballistic missiles and able to make around 100 more per month, such as calibers NKH 101. But Ukrainian government officials said that Ukraine has also been preparing. Ukraine uses German made Gepard anti aircraft guns to tackle incoming drones, while Soviet era Buk systems are used against cruise missiles and US made Patriot against hypersonic Kinjal missiles. That is a key point now for Kiev with US aid bogged down in political infighting and the European Union failing to produce and deliver half of 1 million artillery shells it promised by the end of 2023, Russia may well be launching these vast attacks at a time when Ukraine's supplies could be drying up. So let's talk about NATO reaction to some Russian attacks and what actually NATO is doing or will be doing. Every time another Russian missile or drone flies into the territory of alliance member state, Russia is testing NATO countries and waiting for a response. The official position of NATO, expressed repeatedly by official representatives of this organization, is follows. The main thing is to preserve the unity of the alliance and also, under no circumstances, to prevent NATO from entering the war with the Russian Federation. Official Washington, the undisputed leader of the alliance, expressed the same position, and they follow this policy as consistently as possible. The reasons for this policy are also clear. They are very afraid of nuclear war, and do not want to allow even the thought of such possibility. Russian missiles began to fly into NATO territory from the beginning of the full scale Russian invasion. And this obviously created numerous problems for NATO, which is why they have not yet come up with a single political line for such cases. At first, they simply dismiss the very fact of shelling of NATO territory, attributing everything to Ukrainian anti aircraft missiles. Later, Russian Shahed drones, which were not in service with Ukraine, began to follow the territory of Romania. So, as a result, the Romanian authorities simply started building bomb shelters for the border communities at the Danube Delta River. After that, it was also absurd on the part of Poland to reject the arrival of Russian missile on its territory, but later they recognized that. So the Russian Federation has officially repeatedly attacked NATO territory, and this is an indisputable fact. But what's next? NATO chose the strategy of believing that this was an accident and clearly not a reason to start the war. But you would say, it's been already three, four accidents? Isn't it just not an accident anymore? And here we must remember their strategic goals to preserve unity and prevent entering into a war with Russian Federation. Despite various myths, Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty doesn't state that in the event of attack on one state, others will automatically enter the war. It's written that an attack on the state will be considered an attack on all, but the states will take measures that they consider appropriate. Obviously, measures might vary and should be determined on the basis of consultation. The start of appropriate consultations in the wake of the missile attack on Poland will immediately show the lack of the same unity that officials in Washington and Brussels are so worried about. Because it's truly difficult to imagine that Turkish President Erdogan will express a desire to protect allies in a military confrontation with the Russian Federation. Therefore, it's easier not to raise this issue at all. But there is one problem. If the Kremlin, all this is also well heard. In the Kremlin, it was also well heard, especially since Poland chose one of the worst reaction options to the Russian drone and a rocket falling on its territory. They summoned the Russian temporary representative and sternly warned him that next time they will be definitely we will definitely react seriously. It should not be like that with the Russians, because such a reaction for them is simply a signal that the next time they must definitely check what this reaction will be. And they will check, trust me. Perhaps the rocket will not fly into a field, but for example, into a city. Accidentally, of course, because the Ukrainian Nazis, as Russians say, prevented the unfortunate Russian rocket from fulfilling its denazifying task. And what to do then? The Russian authorities are technically testing NATO at the limits of what is permissible. And so far, apparently, their results are quite satisfactory. Inspections will continue, but each subsequent step will be quite cautious. After all, there is no reason to react if some rocket simply exploded in the field. And if on the territory of the plant, cities, isn't this a reason to start a nuclear war? Of course, starting a nuclear war in response to the launch of one missile is not rational, but not reacting, motivating the aggressor to aggression is also not a very rational answer. Thank you for listening. If you like my podcast, please share with your friends.